His is a familiar name. Plenty of Hawaiians wouldn't mind eradicating from history. Ben Tracy explores the complicated legacy of Captain Cook.
On the big island of Hawaii, where the waves roll into Kealakekua Bay, a white obelisk 27 feet tall looms over the shoreline. It's a tribute to the great circumnavigator, Captain James Cook. It stands just feet from where he died.
I live right across from his monument, and I get up every morning and I see this. This is where they lived.
Akoni Palakat Nelson is a native Hawaiian, or Kanaka as they call themselves. He works for the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, advocating for the native people.
As a kid, what were you taught about Cook?
He brought a lot of diseases. He brought a lot of problems to our society. He introduced westernization.
Is there a frustration that a lot of people almost think the history began here with Captain Cook?
Yes.
Captain Cook is a controversial figure, villain or hero, colonizer or trailblazer, depending on who is telling the story. But what is not in dispute is that in the 1700s, the British explorer literally put much of what we now know as the Pacific Ocean on the map, creating detailed diagrams of the places he was the first European to discover, including New Zealand, Australia, the Cook Islands, which still bear his name, and the islands of Hawaii.
Whatever you think about Cook, he's certainly in the pantheon of the greatest explorers of all time. He gave us the contours of the Pacific Ocean.
Hampton Sides is author of the new book, The Wide, Wide Sea, documenting Cook's final and fateful voyage.
He had 3 voyages around the world. Each one was monumental. But the third voyage left England in July of 1776, just as the American Revolution was taking off.
What was this voyage supposed to be about? What were his marching orders from the Crown?
So Cook's third voyage was to go around the Cape of Good Hope and then to proceed to the west coast of North America and all the way up to Alaska in pursuit of the elusive, the fabled Northwest Passage.
So on his way to trying to find the Northwest Passage, he stumbles upon these islands out here in the Pacific. What was his reaction?
He couldn't believe that he had found these islands, first of all. They aren't on the maps. These aren't just little lowly atolls somewhere out there in the Pacific. These are massive volcanic islands with thousands and thousands of people living here, a whole thriving, flourishing civilization. He couldn't believe it. He was astounded. They were brought up here to this heiau, which is a sacred temple.
He showed us where Cook and his men came ashore on the Big Island, warmly welcomed by the native Hawaiians at this temple during a religious festival. Sides writes in his book that unlike many of his contemporary explorers, Cook took a genuine interest in the people he encountered. He treated them with respect, tried to prevent his men from spreading venereal disease, and made little attempt to convert them to Christianity.
And yet on his third and final voyage, something was wrong with Cook. He was mercurial, he was violent, he was cruel to the native people that he encountered as well. He just was losing it all the time near the end.
That end came when Cook and his men overstayed their welcome, attempting to hold the King of Hawaii ransom to get back a rowboat taken by the local people.
And it turned into a brawl and a melee, and things did not go well for Captain Cook.
Cook was killed on the shore of Kealakekua Bay on Valentine's Day, 1779.
Just across the bay there is where it all ended.
This is where he met his end.
And yet nearly 250 years later, Cook's story is still being told, revisited and revised as the age of imperialism has not aged so well. Statues of Cook have recently been toppled in Canada and Australia. His monument here in Hawaii defaced. Cook was the leading edge of what Pacific Islanders call the fatal impact and the death and loss of their culture that followed.
I get the fact that he has become a symbol of imperialism because he was the first. It's easy to just assign the blame on one person rather than all the people that came after him.
Yet here on the Big Island, you still find Cook's name on a post office, roadside stands, and an apartment complex. There's no simple break from this piece of the past.
Historically, what is this area?
So this is called Kawalumalie.
This National Historic Park is one of the last places on the Big Island that still looks like what Captain Cook and his crew would have seen centuries ago. It was known as a place of refuge, where if you broke a rule or a law, you could get a second chance. Keola Owong is Chief of Interpretation and Education.
But does this in some way feel like a place, too, that is a second chance of preserving this history? All this history that existed before the stuff in the history book?
Yeah, I would agree with that, yeah. It's a second chance for us to get to tell our story, yeah, and tell it from our perspective.
She wants people to see Hawaii as more than a tourist attraction, more than white sands and scarlet sunsets. A place that existed long before it was discovered by a captain named Cook.
When most tourists come to Hawaii, do you get a sense that they know much about the history?
No, they don't know much about the true history. I think they see the history told by the Western point of view. Our culture is very much alive. Our culture carries on, it continues.